I found out I was at war when I opened my mailbox and got fined $75 for planting flowers. No, not poison ivy or invasive bamboo or something out of a horror movie. Just a handful of native milkweed, bee balm, and purple coneflowers tucked along my backyard fence, a pollinator garden I'd started to help butterflies and honeybees rebound in the area. Apparently, that made me a criminal in the eyes of Willow Creek Estates. I stood there in the golden morning light, still holding my mug of cold coffee, staring at the violation notice like it was written in a foreign language. Unapproved landscaping, it read in bold red ink, followed by an accusation of unauthorized environmental modification and a threat of additional daily fines if I didn't remove it by Friday. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, but not from the breeze. I'd moved here 3 months ago, quiet cul-de-sac, good trails nearby, a backyard that backed up to a little patch of woods where deer wandered through at dawn. I didn't want much, just a place to run my field work remotely, maybe find peace after 2 years of burnout. I'd spent most of my 20s waist-deep in swamps, tracking endangered salamanders and climate data across the southeast. The job took a toll. I was ready for silence. But this wasn't silence, this was a warning shot. I turned the notice over. On the back was a photo, taken without my knowledge, from beyond my fence line, zoomed in on a honeybee resting on a flower. Beneath it, in shaky cursive, someone had written, "This is how infestations start." That's when I knew this wasn't about flowers. I walked around to the side of the house where the garden lived, just a small strip of native plants, clearly mulched, staked with a sign that read Certified Monarch Way Station. I'd even sent the paperwork to the HOA office as a courtesy, never got a response. Until now. "Morning, Alex," came a voice from the sidewalk. It was Mr. Henley, retired Navy, always walked his beagle before breakfast. He paused when he saw the paper in my hand. His eyes narrowed. "They get you too?" I raised the notice. "Apparently bees are now a Class A felony." Henley sighed. "Voss doesn't like anything he can't put on a spreadsheet. You should talk to Jenkins. He got fined for painting his mailbox forest green instead of approved hunter green." I let out a humorless laugh. Henley dropped his voice. "Watch your back, son. Voss runs that HOA like a private militia. He's not just protecting grass, he's protecting power." I nodded, unsure what to say. He gave me a sad smile and walked on. Inside, I scanned the entire HOA covenant again. I'd read it before I moved in, but now I went over it with a scalpel. Page after page of overreaching nonsense disguised as community guidelines. Nothing in it specifically banned native gardens, nothing about environmental modifications. Just vague, slippery phrases like aesthetic uniformity and maintenance of visual cohesion. My phone buzzed. It was Dana. My sister was one of those people who could skin a lie alive with a single sentence. A paralegal by day, lifelong overachiever by instinct. She'd helped me pick this place. Quiet, leafy, and weirdly cheap for what you get, she'd said. Now she was on speaker, mid-rant. "They're fining you over flowers? I told you to keep every piece of correspondence with these people. This is how it starts. One violation, then they ratchet it up, bleed you dry, make you look like the problem." "It's fine," I muttered, pulling up the email thread where I'd submitted my garden request. "I have the receipts. They never replied, but I sent it. Time-stamped and everything." She paused. "You need to push back. Hard. Do not let them make you the example." I rubbed my temples. "I just wanted to plant something good. Something alive." Her voice softened. "And you still can. But you need to understand something, Alex. People like Voss don't just want conformity, they want obedience. And you're the exact kind of quiet rebel they hate most." She wasn't wrong. I looked out the window. Across the street, a board member named Marla had fake Tuscan columns on her front porch. 2 blocks down, another had a neon flamingo garden. Neither had been cited for anything. But my wildflowers? Too dangerous. I walked back outside, past the milkweed now swaying gently in the breeze. A monarch butterfly danced between the leaves, its wings orange, delicate, free. It didn't know it was in the middle of a battlefield, but I was starting to. And for the first time since I moved in, I didn't just feel rooted. I felt ready. 2 days later, I was elbow deep in a soil test kit when the knock came, precise, aggressive, like it had been practiced. I opened the front door and found myself face to face with a man who looked like he'd been carved from concrete and ordered to enforce discipline. Buzz cut, mirrored sunglasses despite the shade, and a clipboard tucked so tightly under his arm it might as well have been a sidearm. "Alexander Morgan?" he asked, even though I knew he already knew. "Yes." "Leonard Voss, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association." He didn't offer a handshake, so I didn't bother pretending. Voss stepped forward without being invited, eyes scanning my porch like he was evaluating troop readiness. Your landscaping has been noted for non-compliance under Covenant Section 4.3, unauthorized horticultural installations. I held his stare. It's a pollinator garden, native species only, no structures, no fences, and I submitted a modification request in March. He tapped the clipboard. Which was rejected? No one ever replied. Voss smiled the way a wolf might before testing its prey's Achilles tendon. That's the rejection. Before I could answer, he stepped off the porch and walked briskly around the side of my house. I followed, heart thudding like I was tailing a predator in the wild. He stood in front of my garden like it offended him personally. You understand, this kind of disorder undermines property values. It creates the illusion of neglect. You mean life? I mean entropy, Mr. Morgan. His voice had the clipped precision of a man who'd made a career out of barking commands. Visual inconsistency, non-conforming elements, unchecked growth. I looked down at the milkweed, then up at him. That's what butterflies need to survive. Not in this neighborhood. He took a photo, then another, then a close-up of a bee hovering near a purple bloom. I'll need you to remove all of this by Monday, he said. If not, the board will escalate enforcement. We're authorized to do so under emergency grounds. Emergency? Voss turned to leave, already satisfied. Pollen allergies, insect nuisances, attracting wildlife, take your pick. The message was clear, it didn't matter if I was right, what mattered was obedience. But as he walked back to his silver SUV, perfectly polished HOA logo on the side, I saw something in his reflection as he passed my window. Fear, not of me, not yet, but of anyone he couldn't control. And that gave me something I hadn't felt in days, a reason. I spent the next 48 hours pretending I wasn't raging. Outwardly, life went on, watering the garden, answering emails, logging my wildlife observations like nothing had changed. But under the surface, something sharp and slow was rooting itself inside me. They wanted me to tear up my garden. They wanted me to fold. Instead, I sharpened my focus. That Sunday morning, while my neighbors mowed their identical Kentucky bluegrass lawns into sterile perfection, I pulled a battered folding chair into my backyard, grabbed a notebook, and began documenting everything. Photographic evidence of my native plants, a dated record of my original modification request, screenshots of Marla's columns in the flamingo garden across the street, untouched, unpunished. If they wanted a fight, I wasn't going to meet them in the streets, fists swinging. I was going to bury them in proof. Around noon, I heard a knock on the side gate. It was Mr. Henley again, holding 2 iced teas and wearing a serious expression. You're not the first, you know, he said, handing me a drink. I raised an eyebrow. They fined the Johnsons last year for installing solar panels, said it disrupted the aesthetic flow. Johnsons fought back, nearly lost their house over it. Why? I asked. Why go so hard over flowers? Solar panels? Henley looked down, scuffing his shoe against the dry grass. Because Voss thinks any challenge is an infection, let one person plant their own thing or power their own home, and suddenly people realize they don't need the HOA. They stop being scared. I thought about that for a long moment, watching a swallowtail butterfly dart between my milkweed blooms. What happened to the Johnsons? Henley sighed. They moved, gave up, sold their place at a loss. New owner built a golf simulator in their garage. He patted my shoulder. You got guts, kid, but you better have a plan. I smiled slightly. I do. That night, under the cover of darkness, I logged onto the county's public database and started pulling records, easements, grants, environmental zoning laws. By midnight, I'd found something interesting. Willow Creek Estates had received a state-funded environmental grant 5 years ago, on the condition that green spaces, including undeveloped lots and certain buffer zones, be preserved and maintained. No mention of Voss, no updates filed since. I screenshotted everything, heart pounding faster with every click. Somewhere deep inside their perfect little kingdom, cracks were already forming. And I was going to plant myself right in the middle of them. I barely slept that night. By morning, adrenaline had burned itself into a kind of cold, focused clarity. I made coffee, checked my emails, and there it was, waiting like a landmine. A new violation notice slid under my front door. Fine issued, $50 per day, failure to comply with HOA landscaping regulations. In bold letters at the bottom, additional penalties to be assessed if unauthorized horticultural elements are not removed within 72 hours. No inspection, no hearing, just judgment. I stared at the paper for a long moment, then I folded it neatly, slipped it into a file marked evidence, and went to work. First, I started snapping photos, my backyard, my neighbors' yards, every single unapproved structure or project within a 3-block radius. Marla's cracked fountain, the weird guy on Birch Lane who built a tiki hut in his backyard last summer. The McAllisters' 3 rusting bird baths, all still standing, none fined. Selective enforcement wasn't just obvious, it was laughable. By noon, the temperature had climbed, the cicadas screaming from the trees, when a white HOA golf cart appeared at the end of the street. 2 board members riding shotgun, clipboards again. This time, they weren't even trying to be subtle, pausing in front of my house, taking more photos. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. Good. Neither did I. When they pulled away, I texted Dana a quick update. Alex, second fine. Escalating harassment, collecting evidence. BTW found a grant violation on their green space agreement. Her response came back in seconds. Dana, good. Keep baiting them. Document everything. Also, you should request the HOA's financials. Legally, they have to provide them. I blinked at the message, feeling a slow, wicked smile tug at my mouth. Because financials would mean uncovering what they'd done with that 5-year-old environmental grant. And if Voss had been funneling those funds into anything sketchy, that wasn't just a civil matter. That was criminal. The next morning, I drafted a short, polite certified letter requesting full access to the HOA's financial statements under the Willow Creek HOA Charter, Section 12.2. I mailed it first thing. Then I waited. 3 days passed. No response, but the fines kept coming. Every morning, like clockwork, a new bright orange notice taped to my front door. $50. $50. $50. I pinned them neatly to my kitchen wall like war medals. On the 4th day, Dana showed up, briefcase in hand and eyes flashing with something between excitement and fury. On the 4th day, Dana showed up, briefcase in hand and eyes flashing with something between excitement and fury. She didn't even say hello, just dropped a manila folder onto my kitchen table. Found something, she said. Inside were copies of property deeds, environmental records, and at the very bottom, a scanned document stamped by the County Environmental Bureau. It was an old impact study, one that specifically listed several parcels of land around Willow Creek Estates, including mine, as protected under a conservation easement. Land that Leonard Voss was now quietly preparing to sell to developers. Dana leaned in, voice low but electric. If they mess with you now, they're not just violating HOA rules, they're violating state and federal conservation law. I sat back in my chair, staring at the papers like they might ignite. For the first time, it wasn't just about my little garden anymore. It was about every tree, every patch of wild earth they thought they could bulldoze for profit. And somewhere deep inside, I felt something ancient and unstoppable taking root. Not anger, not revenge, something stronger, something patient. I didn't just want to win, I wanted to expose them, root and branch. We didn't have to wait long. 2 days after Dana found the conservation easement paperwork, something strange happened. A thick manila envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, no postmark, just my name written in bold Sharpie across the front. I opened it carefully, half expecting glitter bombs or some twisted HOA gag. Inside, printed emails, dozens of them. And at the top of the stack, a handwritten note on a yellow post-it. You didn't hear this from me. Check page 7. A friend who got fired for asking too many questions. I sat down on the front steps and started reading. As I flipped through the pages, my stomach dropped. They weren't just HOA emails. They were internal correspondences between Leonard Voss and a real estate firm called Red Horizon Development, thread after thread discussing lot surveys, soil reports, and pricing projections. One thread in particular froze my blood. Voss to Red Horizon, CEO, Greenbelt Parcel B can be cleared if easement status is delayed past Q3. If we keep Morgan tied up with fines, we may be able to proceed without triggering a review. Parcel B. That was my property. Dana's voice rang out from the kitchen as I stumbled in, still gripping the pages. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" I handed her the envelope. She read silently, her mouth tightening with every line. "You realize what this means," she finally said. "They're trying to burn you down to buy time." "To cover up the land deal," I said, while cashing in on the grant money that was supposed to protect it. Dana paced the room. "This is bigger than the HOA. If they're selling off easement-protected land, that's fraud, possibly wire fraud, depending on how the funds moved. We need to go public." "Not yet," I said. "They'll try to spin it, say I'm disgruntled, paranoid, that I doctored the documents." Dana raised an eyebrow. "So what's your move?" I turned toward the window where the garden shimmered in the afternoon sun. Bees drifted lazily between the blooms, unaware they were caught in the middle of something ugly and human. "We wait for the annual HOA meeting," I said slowly. "Everyone will be there, the whole neighborhood. Voss will be performing like a damn dictator." Dana tilted her head. "And you?" I'll be the quiet guy in the back row." I looked down at the packet in my hands, the truth in black and white. "Until it's time to speak." She smiled. "You're going to flip the whole room." "I'm going to flip the board." We spent the next 3 days preparing. I scanned every email, time-stamped each file, backed up everything to multiple drives. Dana tapped her legal contacts, getting advice on how to phrase a public whistleblower disclosure without triggering liability. Meanwhile, I kept tending the garden like nothing had changed. Voss's daily fines still arrived, now up to $650 total. I pinned each one to the kitchen wall beside the post-it note. Each was a receipt, proof that he'd tried to bury me, but he forgot something. You can't bury someone whose roots run deeper than yours. The next morning, someone left a muffin basket on my porch. Blueberry, still warm, no note, but inside, nestled between the paper towels and cinnamon sugar crumbles, was a tiny flash drive. Just one file on it. HOA financials, Q1 to Q4, consolidated.pdf. Dana and I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of evidence, and spent coffee cups, flipping through page after page of what looked like ordinary budget reports until page 11. That's where the missing grant money started showing up. Line items labeled Community Aesthetic Initiative totaling $38,000. Another $17,000 marked Emergency Legal Retainer. Then one labeled Land Preparation, Parcel B, Brush Removal. Dana leaned in. "They already started clearing your land. That's why the fines kept coming. They needed you to give up, walk away, or trigger a clause they could use against you." We stared at each other. "They were laundering the easement into common development use," I whispered. "They're trying to erase it, on paper, in person, before anyone notices." Dana stood abruptly. "We need allies, now." That evening, we printed flyers, not just about the garden or the fines, but about the emails, the conservation easement, the fake budget line items, the secret land deal. We taped them to mailboxes and slipped them under doors after sunset like it was some kind of underground resistance op. I wasn't sure if anyone would respond, until the following morning. I opened my door to find 3 people waiting at the curb. Mr. Henley, Marisol Vega, the landscape architect who got fined last year for putting lavender in her front yard, and, shockingly, Mrs. Patel, who used to serve on the HOA board before Voss pushed her out. "I saw your flyer," she said, voice low but steady. "I always wondered what happened to that grant. I signed the application myself before Voss took over. The money was meant for preserving the wooded lots and building native gardens, but nothing ever got built." Marisol nodded. "He told everyone it was delayed due to contractor issues." Henley folded his arms. "That was 5 years ago." We stood there in silence for a moment, all of us looking at the garden blooming defiantly behind me. "I'm going public at the meeting," I said, "but I need backup, people who know what's going on." Mrs. Patel smiled faintly. "He made this personal. It's about time someone returned the favor." As the sun rose behind them, casting long shadows across my front walk, I realized something that sent a chill through me. Leonard Voss didn't just have enemies now, he had a crowd. The Willow Creek HOA annual meeting was held every summer in the rec center gym, complete with uncomfortable folding chairs, stale lemonade, and the forced cheer of bureaucrats pretending to serve the people. This year, the parking lot overflowed. I counted at least 50 cars before I even stepped inside. The room was buzzing, not with idle gossip or discussion about lawn treatments, but with low, urgent voices. People knew. The flyers had done their job. Dana leaned in close as we approached the door. "Remember, he's going to try to steamroll. Stick to the facts. Let him bury himself." "Got it," I said, but my pulse was hammering. The air inside was thick with tension and citrus-scented floor wax. I spotted Marisol, Mr. Henley, Mrs. Patel, all seated near the front, flanking the small wooden podium where Voss was already rearranging his stack of notes. He wore a crisp polo with the HOA emblem, his smile wide and false as ever. He looked calm. Too calm. "Welcome, neighbors," he began, tapping the mic. "Let's get started. We have a packed agenda tonight. New fees, a discussion of future development, and of course a few words about recent misinformation floating around." Dana whispered, "He knows." I nodded. "Let's make sure everyone else does too." As he droned through the opening items, I unzipped my backpack and pulled out the flash drive, already loaded with a clean, simple slideshow. Emails, budget documents, satellite images of Parcel B, and the state-issued conservation map. We were ready. "And now," Voss said, raising his voice slightly, "I'd like to address the rumors circulating about our stewardship of Greenbelt property. These claims are baseless and defamatory. The HOA has acted within its rights at all times." "Excuse me," I said, standing. Every head turned. Phones lifted, eyes locked. Voss's smile faltered. "I'd like to speak as a resident," I said, moving toward the projector table. "I have something to share with the board, and with all of you." He tried to cut in. "We don't allow..." Section 9.3 of the Charter grants any resident the right to present material evidence regarding board conduct at the annual meeting, Dana said, stepping forward like a closing argument in heels. Voss froze. I plugged in the drive. The screen lit up behind me. Slide 1, the original conservation map clearly marking my property and adjacent lots as protected greenbelt, under easement since 2018. Gasps rippled through the room. Slide 2, a financial record showing $38,000 billed under Community Aesthetic Initiative, with 0 receipts of actual expenditures. Slide 3, the internal email. If we keep Morgan tied up with fines, we may be able to proceed without triggering a review. Silence fell like a thunderclap. Voss's face turned gray. A woman in the back stood up. "You tried to develop a conservation zone?" Another voice, Mr. Jenkins from Birch Lane. "Is that why my request for a shade tree grant disappeared?" "I sent this to the State Environmental Board yesterday," I said quietly. "The easement is still active. The land is still protected. Any attempt to sell or build violates state law and could trigger criminal liability." Voss stumbled forward. "This is all out of context. That email, who knows if it's even real? This is a coordinated attack. These people are your neighbors," Dana cut in, "and many of them want to know what you did with nearly $70,000 in public conservation funding." Murmurs turned into shouts. Mrs. Patel stepped up beside me. "I was on the board when we filed that grant. We were supposed to build a walking trail and restore wildflower habitats, and nothing happened. The money vanished." Someone yelled from the crowd, "We need a new board." Another voice, "Vote him out. Right now." Voss tried to speak again, but he was drowned out. And just like that, the room turned. Phones recorded every word. Chairs scraped as neighbors stood to surround the podium. Marisol calmly stepped behind the projector and clicked to the final slide. A line of bulldozers staged along Parcel B, photographed the week before, idling near my property line. Voss looked at the image like it was an execution photo. "Get out," someone whispered. He stared at the crowd, red-faced, sweating, and then, with visible effort, straightened his shoulders. "This meeting is adjourned," he snapped. "No," said Mr. Henley, stepping forward. "This meeting is just getting started." Voss didn't walk out. He fled. The moment Mr. Henley stepped forward, the board president backed away from the podium like it had turned radioactive. He muttered something about legal counsel, shoved his notes into a folder, and shoulder-checked his way through the crowd. But no one followed him. They followed us. By the time he reached the parking lot, at least a dozen neighbors were filming him. Others were demanding audits. Questions flew faster than he could escape them. What happened to the tree fund? Why were contractors clearing the woods before permits? Why is Parcel B listed under a Shell LLC you co-own? He jumped into his SUV and peeled out without answering a single one. Inside the gym, the room pulsed with a kind of collective realization. He was never protecting the neighborhood. He was strip mining it. The remaining board members stood frozen, paper-faced, like statues awaiting trial. One of them, a woman named Cheryl who'd always kept her head down, finally cleared her throat. I didn't know about the land deal." Dana stepped in like a closing argument wrapped in grace. "You'll have a chance to prove that, but tonight we're requesting an emergency vote to suspend all board activities pending an audit." "I second that," said Mrs. Patel. "Third," said Marisol. "Unanimous," someone yelled from the back. The crowd erupted into applause, not loud, not raucous, just steady, satisfied, a sound like walls coming down. I leaned against the wall and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. Dana nudged my arm, eyes scanning the crowd. "That was one hell of a reveal," she said. "Was it the bulldozer photo that did it?" "No," she smirked. "It was the silence. Yeah, people finally heard how quiet truth can be." By the time we left, the rec center parking lot had turned into an impromptu town hall. Neighbors clustered in little huddles, trading stories, violations, threats, whispers of fines they'd paid without question. They weren't just angry, they were awake. And Voss? He was gone. Disappeared from his usual morning walks. No HOA emails, no new fines, just radio silence and a for sale sign that appeared on his lawn 5 days later, tilted slightly like even the post had given up. The fines stopped arriving the following week. No more orange notices, no clipboard-wielding sentries pacing the sidewalk, no more photographs taken without consent, just stillness. And in that stillness, something incredible began to happen. Neighbors who had barely spoken to me before started dropping by, not with complaints, but with curiosity. Mr. Chen brought over heirloom tomato seedlings. Marisol returned with a tray of lavender and sage cuttings. Even the Henderson twins, usually glued to their phones, showed up asking if they could help build a bee hotel. They didn't call it rebellion, they called it gardening, and that was the whole point. By mid-month, the newly appointed interim board had frozen all spending, launched an independent audit, and filed a formal request with the State Environmental Commission to recertify the protected Greenbelt parcels. Parcel B, the one Voss tried to erase, was now under a preservation order, backed by county enforcement and volunteer oversight. No bulldozers, no development, just the sound of wind in the leaves and the occasional chorus of frogs at dusk. Dana naturally was roped into leading the legal subcommittee. She grumbled the entire time and showed up to meetings with color-coded folders, but I caught her smiling more than once when someone referred to her as the reason we still have trees. As for me, I went back to tending my garden. The milkweed was thriving. So were the bees. But something had shifted, not just in the soil, but in the air around us. There was laughter in the yards now, shared tools between neighbors, and a sense that we weren't just coexisting anymore. We were co-stewarding. Every time I saw someone planting something new, tearing out sod to make space for life, it reminded me that this fight had never really been about me. It was about reclaiming the right to root yourself in the world without asking permission to bloom. Late one afternoon, I was kneeling in the garden, fingers deep in the dirt, when it happened. A monarch butterfly, wings bright as firelight, drifted down and landed on the back of my hand. It just sat there, still and unafraid, its tiny legs tickling my skin as if it knew this was home. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched it flex those orange and black wings like slow, defiant flags in the wind. Behind me, someone chuckled. I turned to see Mrs. Patel standing on the sidewalk with a clipboard, not the HOA kind, but one with sketches of a new pollinator corridor we were designing together. She smiled. "They're choosing this place again." I looked back at the butterfly. So are we. We'd drafted plans for community gardens, native plant trails, and a small greenhouse. None of it mandatory, all of it collaborative, and every inch of it rooted in the idea that nature, like people, thrives when you stop trying to control it. Later, I added a small wooden sign at the edge of my garden, hand-painted, weatherproof, "Let the quiet things grow." The old board was gone, the fines were gone, but the silence? That stayed. Only now it wasn't fear, it was peace. And in that silence, things bloomed. Wild, loud, free, just like they were meant to.